Hey there, scholars! My name is Mary Snyder, and I am a volunteer with the Frederick Council. And I am here to share a little bit about GED math so that perhaps this might be helpful to you in your studying, or you may be inclined to join one of our virtual or in-person workshops. So today I wanted to spend a few minutes sharing about myself, but then also about reading charts and graphs with the GED. So again, my name is Mary Snyder, and I am a relatively new, actually, volunteer with the Literacy Council. In my day-to-day life, I am a librarian. I help people with reading and books and letters and words. But I have always really enjoyed math. Growing up, I loved math. I had the privilege, the luck of having teachers that made math fun and exciting. And while there were absolutely times where math was stressful and frustrating for me, overall, I look back on it as very, very much a satisfaction that I was able to push through. I was able to study and practice and go to office hours, go after school, ask friends, get a tutor, right? I had to work hard. Don't get me wrong, I had to work hard, but having the challenge and rising to the challenge was very rewarding. So here I am, wanting to help others rise to that challenge and work on their math skills to not only pass and succeed for the GED, but also move on from that. Whatever your next goal is it college? Is it a training program? Is it helping your kids or nieces or grandkids or nephews in math, right? Maybe it's using math in the workplace. Whatever that goal is, I'm sure the GED is maybe just one step on your path. So I'm happy to be here today to share some information with you. And then also maybe in the future, we will cross paths as well. So on to our topic of the day, the GED, specifically the math portion. Now, bear with me. I have some notes here, so I'm going to be looking down. But as you may or may not know, the GED has multiple portions to it, and one of the sections, one of the subject tests, is the math or mathematical reasoning. And I want to take a minute to remark on that title, mathematical reasoning. That sounds very foreboding, maybe. That sounds very big. It's mathematical reasoning. But as I read and learned more about this exam, I think it's actually a little bit of a relief. The test is more about your reasoning and logic and applying knowledge. It is less about memorizing formulas. It is less about memorizing facts, memorizing numbers. It is more about applying what you know and using reason and logic and deduction. In fact, there is a um, cheat sheet provided during the test that lists out common formulas that are used in the exam, so then you don't have to memorize them. So, mathematical reasoning. Now, within the mathematical reasoning subject test, there are four common areas that you're tested on. I say four concept areas, and one of them is graphs and charts and functions, which is what I'll share some sample problems here in a minute. The test overall, the math test, it is 115 minutes total, but 5 of those minutes are not for test taking, right? They have some minutes at the beginning to give you the instructions, and then you take a portion of the test, which is timed, and then you have a 3-minute break, and then you have another second section of the test. So why is the test split in two? One reason is that the first portion of the test, you do not get a calculator. And the second portion, you do get one. So in that 3-minute break, if you choose to, you can go and grab yours from your purse, your bag, right? Whatever's your secure area that is set aside, assuming you're taking the test in person, because there are options to take it online. But if you don't have one, or if you prefer not to use that 3-minute break to go grab it, uh, you can use the built-in one to the software. As I was reading more about the questions for this second part, I learned that while they offer you that calculator, it's not actually required for every question. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you're prepping for this, right? Again, you don't have to memorize as much. It's focusing on your reasoning, your logic, your deduction. How can you apply what you've learned to answer the question? So while you do have that calculator available, you don't actually need it for every question in the second half. Now, all of the questions on the math portion or on the math subject test, section 1 and section 2, are all multiple choice. So multiple choice in the sense that they'll give you 4 answers and you pick the correct one. You have to click the little button to fill in, right? The radio button. Maybe a drop down. You have to click on the graph, things like that. So, with all that being said, let me show some problems. Let me show some charts and graphs. So, let's see here. Let me grab this from my other screen. Oh, excuse me, actually, before I do a chart and graph, let me show you something else. So I mentioned that with the GED, they actually provide a built-in calculator, and they also provide a formula sheet. So you can have access to that and get that. So while you're studying and practicing, you can study and practice just like you'll need to take the test. So here at GED.com, I chose to create an account. And I'm going to click login because I've already created it, but you can see create account. So I have created it and logged in. See? Okay. And here we go. So you can see here how they do have some free study guides for those 4 areas. You can click math. Here on the math, we have those 4 sub areas that I mentioned for that math. But then if you keep on scrolling down, here we go. You can see this math formula sheet. And this is a PDF that you can save, you can print, maybe you visit the local library. If you don't have a printer at home, I know I don't have a printer at home. It's way too much effort to keep that. So I always like to visit my local library to print off things. But you can print this off and have this handy for you. So when you're working on any portion of your math studying, you can have it. Specifically, there are some points in here which are specific to the graph and chart questions. So for example, they keep the definition of mean and median here. And then they also have some formulas which are specific to the graphs and functions. Excuse me, the graphs and charts. So mean, let me dive into some of this content. Mean, there's another common word for mean that you may recognize. So I'll pause for a minute. What's a synonym for mean? It's average. Mean is also the same as average. That's something that you'll learn as you explore math more, is that there's never one way to say anything. So mean is average, the average of something. So you add everything up. The total of the values is also the sum of something, right? You add it all up and you divide it by the total number. So let's say you have 5 children and their ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you want to find your mean, the mean age, the average age. You're going to add up all of your children's ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and divide by 5 because there's 5 children. Let's say if you have twins, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do you still divide by 5? Yes, because you're dividing by the number of elements. So the total number. So mean, sum, average, total. And this is something that you can see in charts and graphs. This is also something that you can determine or figure out or calculate using a chart. A median is the middle, right? When we're driving on a road, there's a median in the road. It's the middle of the road. Same in math. It is the middle value. When you have all of your child's ages, the middle child, the median child by age, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 5, 6, 7 is the median. It's the middle child. Now, it gets a little tricky when you have an even number, as they have written here. Well, I shouldn't say tricky. I do not want to say tricky because that makes it sound difficult. It's just a little extra fact that you need to know. So let's say if you have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are your ages. Maybe you have 6 children, ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Your median child, obviously there's no middle child. It's sort of these 2 children sort of share that role of middle child, the median. And so your median is actually the average of those two. So 5, 6, 7, 8. So 7 and 8, you average those, you add them together, divide by 2, and then that would be your median, 7.5. So mean and median. Again, when you're looking at charts, you might be asked to determine the median. A chart is a list of numbers in columns and rows. There's also a type of graph. It's a box and whisker plot that shows you the median. So we also have slope of the line, slope of a line. This is something you'll use in multiple parts of the exam, but also in the graph and chart section. The slope-intercept form, point-slope form. These are the 3 most common ones. And then if we jump down here to the distance formula, this is also one that we would be touching on with charts and graphs, most likely. Okay, so I encourage you to print this off, have it handy, use it as part of your study routine. Now, let's do a sample problem or 2, and then I'll wrap this video up. Let's see here. Let me pull up one of my other websites here. Okay, here we go. Now you should be able to see on my screen this website, Get Some Math. It's a little funny joke there, right? Get some. A sum is a total, but it's also a word that sounds like the word S-O-M-E, sum. Okay. Little math dorky humor there, some nerdy humor. So Here is a style of problem that you might see on the issue GED. A type of chart or graph, and then a question about it. So you have to be able to read the chart or graph. This happens to be a pie chart. Now there's another name for pie charts. You might recognize a pie chart as being called a circle graph. So a circle graph or a pie chart, they are the same. And it's a pie chart, right? Because it looks like pie. It looks like pie slices, cutting slices of pie, right? This nice, huge 30% piece of the pie. It's also, you can remember that this is a circle graph because it is the only kind of graph that you'll see on the issue GED that is shaped like a circle. The whole thing is a circle. So here's our question. At the top, we have the title of the graph. So the title is Time Spent on Activities by Zoo Staff at Green Valley Zoo. So let's take a minute to read this chart, read this graph. So 35% of their time is on animal care, 25% is on feeding, 30% is on cleaning, and 10% is on other. So anything else. Now, because these are percentages, percent system is based on 100. So all of these, if we were to add them up, they add to 100. So 25% of the time, 1/4 of their time is on feeding. Okay, now we can also see here, right? Most of their time is spent on animal care because that's the highest percentage, 35. Second most time is on cleaning enclosures, 30%. Third most time is on feeding. And then other. Other duties as assigned. Everyone's favorite job at work, right? Other duties. So here's our question. During a 40-hour work week, how many hours does a zoo staff member spend on cleaning? So during a 40-hour work week, how many hours on cleaning? So we're going to look up here and say 30% of their time is on cleaning. So 30% of 40 hours. So if you want to pause this video and think about how you'd solve the question, please do. So there's multiple ways that one could solve this question. The way that comes to my mind is to use two fractions or two proportions. So let me just pause my screen. Let me open up an Excel file real quick, just because then I can do my math inside of Excel. You could be scribbling this on your sheet of paper. Honestly, I was inclined to do that, but then you can't see it if I'm scribbling on my sheet of paper. Okay, so two fractions or two ratios, two proportions, right? These are all related terms. So 30% is out of 100. So that's our first fraction, 30 out of 100. And then we want to know how many hours is that? So that's our unknown out of 40. So we have our two ratios here. Let me see if I can put this a little bit more visually. Bear with me here. You absolutely do not need to be writing stuff like this. This is not necessary for how you would study. This is just because of the computer that I have right now with me. This is what it looks like. And I'm going to pivot. Hold on. That was a silly idea. Sometimes with math, it's more complex to go with software and things. Sometimes, right? We just want to stick with the basics. Okay, let's try again here. I have a little paint window open here. So 30 over 100, this represents 30%. And we want to find out the number of hours. So we're setting up a proportion ratios. And we're going to solve the ratios. So 30 out of 100 is equal to something out of 40. We don't know what that something is. So how do we solve for that something? We multiply the numerator and the denominator that we know. And then we divide by the remaining denominator, and that gives us x. So to write it a second way, 30 times 40. Put our parentheses to make sure we maintain order of operations, which will be another day. Divide by 100. I'm going to take out my handy dandy calculator because as much as I love math, I don't do mental math very well. I don't trust my mind. I don't trust my mental math. That is a skill I need to develop. And I got my answer. I'm going to pause for a minute in case you want to sit and think on this, pause this video, and find X yourself. Okay. Are you ready? Did you also get 12? 12 is your answer. That's how many hours. Could you imagine cleaning for 12 hours a week? Every week. Oh, I'm sure some of us clean more or less than that sometimes. Well, thank you for joining me today to talk about some math, to talk about the GED. I hope I see you on a future day to talk about charts and graphs and order of operations and all of these great topics that we need to learn to take successfully the GED and pass and move on to our next goal. Thank you very much. Bye.